Alright, welcome back to a new TouchDesigner tutorial. And in this video, we are going to look at a very exciting new technique, which combines the AI image generation StableDiffusion with TouchDesigner. And in this particular video, we are going to look at these audio-reactive flowers right here, which I think are quite pretty, and they react very nicely to audio, and they're also not too flickery. So the idea here is that we have this network where we're working with a component that is created by .simulate and that I have linked in the description. So to be able to use this, you have to support him on his Patreon, which I recommend anyways. And if you don't want to use his component, if you don't want to pay, then you can also kind of create this on your own. I have also linked a video for that. So pretty much what this is just doing is using the API of StableDiffusion. So we have StableDiffusion running locally on our laptop, our computer, and we're sending data back and forth between that StableDiffusion tool that is created by Automatic 1111. So we're basically using that web UI thing that I've also linked in the description. So basically all you have to do is go to that link and download whatever we have on here. So all of this zip, or you can just go down here and do the automatic installation. For now, this is all kind of more working on Windows. I don't really know about Apple. I'm just going to be focusing on Windows for now. So yeah, just download that web UI and this API component. That's all you need to do to get this running. Then the idea here is to create a texture inside of TouchDesigner that is based on or reacting to audio. Then we're sending that into the API, into StableDiffusion, and doing some image to image here. So we're creating a texture in TouchDesigner frame by frame, and then we're basically using StableDiffusion more as a way to stylize it or to make it look really cool. But the kind of logic and audio reactivity and most of the work is done already in TouchDesigner, which I really like. So for me, StableDiffusion isn't like the tool that just does everything, which, you know, for a lot of people, AI kind of is. For me, it's more like an extension of what we already have or how I'm already working inside of TouchDesigner. And we're really a lot in control, incorporating it into our network here. So without further ado, I think we can just get started. So as always, I'm just going to go ahead and delete everything. And what I'm going to do is just drop the ST API talks in here. But we're not going to look at that right away. I'm going to add a base in here and call this Independent. It's going to give this a green color. So why am I doing this? Well, the idea here is that as I already mentioned, we're doing this kind of frame by frame animation. So the thing is, StableDiffusion takes around 5 to 10 seconds for one frame to be created. So this is technically not real time. So TouchDesigner is running in real time because StableDiffusion is running asynchronously, parallelly on our machine. But TouchDesigner is still running at 24 or whatever FPS you have specified. But the thing is, as every frame takes a certain amount of time, depending on your parameters, settings here, and also, of course, your GPU and stuff, it doesn't really make sense to just create a normal animation and just input it like that, because it's gonna skip like most of the frames, just picking a frame every so and so seconds. So what we have to do is create a timeline that runs independently from the main timeline, which is this one right here. So every time basically one frame is finished being created by StableDiffusion, it sends a signal basically to our independent timeline. And so that one goes one frame further and then sends the next frame into StableDiffusion. And again, when that is done, it sends the next frame and so on. So we're kind of creating this logic. Whenever there's a frame done, we're moving one frame further in this independent timeline. So that way we can work with audio, we can work with video, we can work with any kind of animation, and we don't have to worry about how long one frame takes to be created. And it works really well for me. So to create an independent timeline, all we have to do is right click on our base and add component time. So now if we go in here, we can see it's created this base as well as a new timeline. And inside of this base, which is called local, we have a time component. So what's important here is that we change our rate here to cook rate, parentheses. So it always grabs automatically the FPS from our main timeline. Now we can see both of these timelines are pretty much the same. I mean, exactly the same length, really. What we want to do here is actually not play this, because we want to go through this frame by frame, as I said, whenever Stable Diffusion is done processing a frame. What we want to do here now is create or add audio. So I'm just going to add an audio file in Shop, and for this example, we're just going to work with the default one. As you can see, it's not processing anything, even though our main timeline is working. Actually, also what we want to turn on here is independent, like run independently, just to be sure that it's just doing its own thing. By the way, the length of the main timeline doesn't matter at all to us. We're just going to have that looping. It doesn't matter. So the length of our timeline here, so I'm just going to add an info chop. That kind of does matter depending on your song length. In this example, we are working with music. You're not always going to be working with music, but it makes sense to look at the file length frames here and then to use that for the length of our timeline. So we can look at, okay, it was like 1687, and now we can just type that in here. And here on the range end, we can just type in me.par.end. So it always just grabs whatever is in here. So you might think, okay, why are we not just doing this automatically linked to this channel? Well, that's going to create a kind of cook dependency loop and gives us errors. So you actually have to type that in manually. For the most part, the way I was working so far is just type in a higher number, and I was just doing short clips anyway. So this is only relevant if you're doing like the whole song pretty much. But what I would also recommend is changing the play mode here to lock to timeline. So actually now if I move through this timeline, I'm moving through this song. So that also really helps, especially when you want to pick certain parts of the song to share in social media or whatever. So I'm going to add an audio device out. I'm going to bypass that for now, and middle mouse, I'm going to add a math and combine the channels with average. So we just have one sort of mono channel pretty much. And then I'm going to add an audio spectrum. Just go up with the high frequency boost. And then I'm going to add a null, right click anywhere, collapse selected, and call this circles. So this is kind of the setup part. This is not really the fun part. The fun part starts later on when we're working with Stable Diffusion. For now, what we want to do here is we want to create a visualization of the music. Very, very simple thing that is nothing really new. I'm just going to give this a color, and let's move in here. All right, I want to resample this because right now we have 22,050 samples, and I'm going to use my component simple resample, but really all this is a resample chop. Just makes things a bit quicker, easier. I'm going to resample this to 100 samples. Actually, no, 60. And this is going to determine how many circles we're going to have for the instancing later on that we're doing now. And from my null, what I want to do, I want to convert this into tops. And we're going to create a bunch of different branches from here. So first off, I'm going to add a noise. Actually, on my chop too, I'm going to change the pixel format to 32-bit float RGBA. Add a noise. And on my noise, I'm going to change a bunch of things. So first off, on my output, I just want to have noise. I don't care about the input here. I'm going to go down for my period, 2.2, and no harmonics. And I'm going to go down with the offset, turn off monochrome, and then add another null and call this pause for position. Before that, I'm actually going to add a math as well. And just, we'll want to change the ranges later on. I'm also going to add a noise, second noise, because we want to create some color. And for this color noise, I'm going to just go down with the exponent to 0.7 and the offset to 0.7. That's all I'm going to do here. We also just want to have noise. I'm going to add a lookup to this, as well as a ramp. And on my ramp, I'm going to change the colors to like a strong red, and then to a yellow color. So these are going to be the colors of our circles. I'm going to add another null and call this color. So I'm going to add a circle SOP as well as a transform. And on my transform, I'm going to go down to uniform scale to 0.2. And I'm going to add a geometry from there, as well as a camera, as well as a render top, all the usual stuff. Constant material, put that on here, power material, and another noise top that we're going to use for texturing. And on my noise, I'm going to go down the amplitude to 0.1 and the offset to 0.9 and the period to 2. So we're doing this because we want to make sure generally that we have as little flat surfaces as possible, unless that's really what we're going for in the end. But generally speaking, it makes sense to work with textures that and like noise, and we're gonna go deeper into that. So basically, we're just giving Stable Diffusion more noise to work with. All right, one important thing here is the resolution. So Stable Diffusion only accepts certain types of resolution. So let's say you want to go 16 by 9. A good resolution to work with is 1024 by 576. And then you can see it's a 16 by 9. And then you can later on upscale it to a proper resolution like 1920 by 1080. But I found this to work quite well. You can also, if you want things to go faster, you can kind of divide this by a certain number. It doesn't always necessarily work, but I will also mention something about this later on. I actually want to have a vertical 3x4, so I'm going to do 576 by 768. And now you can see we've got a 3x4, which works very well for me. I'm just going to add an out here because I want to send this out. And on my cam, I'm going to go alpha 1 so we have a black background. On my geo, I am going to turn on instancing and use pause for position for translation and use R and G for X and Y. So you can already see we have our circles. So they look pretty ugly for now. So we also want to rearrange them through 3 and 4 here. So they're nicely kind of spread over the canvas. On my camera, I also might want to move out. I don't know. No, actually, I think it's fine. Is all right. On my second instance page, I'm going to change the color here to RGB. So we can already see our circles have these nice gradient colors from red to yellow. So one thing we might notice here now is that all of the textures are the same. So it might be nice to add some rotation. So I'm going to add a math to this. Actually, also want to add a noise. And again, just noise. And we might want to change the seed. And we don't really need to change anything else. On my math, I'm going to rearrange this to 360. Add another null, call this rotation. And let's now put that on here and rotate ZR. So now you can see all of the textures are kind of rotated around. They don't look as similar as before. And last but not least, we want to also create some scale variation. So I'm just going to use a math from here. So we want to change the scale based on, not on noise, but on the audio spectrum. That's why, I mean, we're kind of using that after all. So I'm going to change my range here to 0.3 and 6. It's just some values that work well in my experience. In this context, I'm going to add a lag per sample. And on my lag, I'm going to change it to 0.05 and 0.5. And I'm going to add another null and call this scale. And go here again, put that in here, and I'm going to use Gen 1 for X and Y scale. So now if we go through here, you can see sort of how it's reacting to the sound. I mean, if you do actually want to listen to the sound and see this in real time, so turn on real time, go to the local here. And actually what you might want to do is customize this component, go in here and use that play parameter, set expression source, so we can always kind of go play and not play from top level. Don't always have to go in there. And now if we turn on the audio device out, we can now see that this is now nicely reacting to the audio. So I'm going to turn that off again, turn off real time, and go back in here because there's another thing I want to add. And that is animation. So I'm going to add an analyze as well as a math job, which I'm going to multiply by 2. Then I'm going to add a lag as well as a speed. And a null as always. I'm going to call this anim for animation. On my lag, I'm going to change my value here to 0.02. And now basically this is gonna, whenever there's more level, this is gonna be pushed forwards. So we can use this on all free noises as the Z transform. So now every time the kick hits, or generally we have a louder volume, all of these noises are gonna be pushed forward in their animation pretty much. Cool. So we have created our circles. Another thing that we want to do here is displace them because now they're really just regular old circles. So to make them a bit more organic, we can add a displace and a noise. Turn off monochrome, change this to just noise, put that in the second input. On my displace weight, I'm going to change that to 0.05 on both axes. And on my noise, just going to go down for my amplitude slightly. Maybe it's still a bit too much. Something like that. You can play around with this. I just want to, you know, one general advice, word of advice here is if you're creating this kind of stuff in Stable Diffusion, the texture that you are creating here in TouchDesigner should already resemble what you're going for as an output in the end, at least slightly. So, I mean, if you show this to someone, they might not think this is a flower, but you know, this is already kind of going in that direction. So you wouldn't make water out of this, right? Maybe even water, but you have to change the colors then, or you know, this doesn't look like a building or a forest. So if you want to create these kind of things, make sure that the texture that you're already creating in TouchDesigner at least sort of resembles that. All right, as I've already mentioned, we want to add some noise to this because right now we have a lot of just black part here, and it's cool to have some slight texture always that Stable Diffusion can kind of work with. So I'm just going to add a random texture here and change the offset to 0, amplitude to 0.2, and no monochrome. So now you can see we're creating this noise everywhere. On top of that, I want to create even more dynamics by adding another noise. On that one, I'm going to go down with the amplitude to 0.24, offset 0.8, and output actually multiplying. So you can see we're almost adding like a shading, like a shadow kind of thing. And again, that just adds more dynamics in the final result. So let's add an out here, and then we're basically done with our texture. So we can actually move to the more fun part. So I'm going to add a null and call this input. And anything we're doing before, we're always going to connect to that null and then input that into the first input of our ST API component. All right, so what we've got to do here first, if this is the first time that you're using this, is go to API settings and make sure that the ST Web UI folder is correct. So wherever you have your ST Web UI, you should look for that, and you can either click on this plus. I'm just gonna look for that here and copy the path and paste that in here. So that will depend on wherever you have your Stable Diffusion Web UI. If you don't know where you have it, just search for it. I'm actually gonna get rid of this. I don't really need that. There is one command line that is very important, which is / or minus, I don't know how you call that, API, but that is already automatically done when you click launch web UI. So that's actually what we're going to be doing now, is launch that web UI. And that is going to open up this command window here. And it's going to take a while to load. So here you can see we're launching web UI with the arguments API. Whatever you had already in here, if you didn't delete that, that would come here as well. So you can see it's done once it's doing this one, once it's showing you this expression to create a public link, blah blah blah. Once that is there, you're ready to go pretty much. So I'm going to push that over here. And I'm not going to look at any of these other things. If for some reason something doesn't work with the port IP address, you can see this is your local URL. So 127.0.0.1 is your IP address, and this 7.8.6.0 is your port. Oh, if it's different, then check it there. All right, so we're going to go back to settings. I'm not going to look at these things much. There is an output folder where this component automatically saves every frame inside of a Windows or whatever OS folder. I don't really care that much about it because I don't really use it, but you can open it and you can see what I've already done here, created all of these flowers frame by frame, which is cool. And it also enables us to go change the slider. Yeah, it doesn't work that well right now because I changed folders, but never mind. I'm not going to look into ControlNet right now, but that's a whole nother story. So let's focus on settings. First off, as I said, we don't want to do text to image. We want to do, so this is what it should look like for you. We want to do image to image. So you can do text to image and just create one image from a prompt. And then it doesn't even need this input here. But we've created this input, so let's use it. Image to image. And then you can select your model here. I'm just going to go with the kind of default one, 1.5. I know there's many out there. If you want to download a different one, you can check out this website, civitai, or I don't know what it's civitai.com. I'm just going to link that as well. And this dreamlike area of art animated, dreamlike diffusion, those are really good ones as well. A lot of those look a lot like, and you know, most of them are about anime, which I really honestly hate. A lot of them are also porn, so just you gotta find your way. I mean, they all look like, I just hate that, to be honest. It all looks the same. So you've just got to find the right one for you. Maybe you've already worked with AI and already using some. Well, all right, so I'm just gonna use the default one, sort of. Before we generate anything, let's look at the prompts, because they are obviously a main part. Instead of typing in prompts here, what I want to do is add a text dat, as well as a convert dat, and then a null, which I'm going to call prompt. And in my text here, I'm just going to copy and paste what I have used as my prompt. So it's kind of random. I can share that also in the description. But really, it's just some words added together. But I mean, that's how prompting works, right? So as I said, you can use any prompt here. You can use any style, anything. But always make sure that when you're using this kind of technique that we're doing right now, that your texture is already kind of resembling what you're going for. Usually that's the best way to do it. So I'm just going to push that on here and add brackets and 0, 0. And we also want to create a negative prompt. I'm just gonna call this like P0. Copy and paste the whole thing. Just call this N0 and call this negative. Put that on here, and again add brackets 0, 0. So for negative stuff, I mean, there's a lot of things you can put in there. For now, I'm just gonna go with ArtStation because I kind of hate that style. I don't know why everybody's going for that, honestly. Dots, lines, because with these flowers, sometimes it creates lines. And also I'm gonna actually just be sneaky and type in copyright and logo. I don't know if it actually helps, but sometimes there's logos being created, which I don't like. You know, the whole kind of moral thing and if this is stealing or not is a whole discussion that we're not gonna touch upon now. All right, let's look at all of these parameters now. So first off, denoising strength is very important when we're working with image to image, because that determines how much of the image that we're inputting here is actually gonna sort of be used, or how much is gonna be StableDiffusion doing its thing. So if it's set to denoising strength 1 as it is now, and we generate something, let's just go ahead and do that. We can see now in our window here that we have this progress bar. So it's quite slow right now because of the sampler and the step count that we have selected, and also probably because I'm recording my screen. now we can see it created these really nice flowers, beautiful and all, but they don't resemble what we've created here at all. That's because the denoising strength is set to 1. So I'm going to go down of 0.5 to 0.5. Usually I found that to work very well. So it's kind of right in the middle. I wouldn't recommend going much higher or much lower, but in the end, you're always completely free to check all of this out. Really interesting is also the mask, which is something that you can input here as a second input. So you can kind of determine what parts of the image are being affected and which are not. The step count, I've already just quickly mentioned that. It's pretty much how many iterations Stable Diffusion does. For testing, usually it's recommended to do 10 to 15. So I'm just going to go 15 for now. But if you're really happy with your prompt and all your other settings, you can go up to 25. CFG scale. I've also linked a website that kind of explains all of these. CFG scale, I would usually go for values somewhere between 6 and 10. If you go too high or too low, it's going to look weird. Seed is is an interesting topic. So I personally like, yeah, just so you know, you can just type in -1 and it's going to be random seed. And then you can also define manual seeds. And then you can also do like alias time.frames on here. So the seed is constantly changing. There's many different approaches to this. I personally just leave one seed that I choose. So I type in, I don't know, for example, 101. And then I just stay with that one seed because I'm changing the input. So it doesn't start to look weird or anything. But that's something that you have to figure out on your own, whatever works best for you to work with the seed here. Sampler is another kind of big topic. For me, I have found that DPM++ 2M Keras works really well and kind of fast. I don't really need a subseed, and you don't really need to worry about the other stuff for now. All right, so now we can again try to generate a frame. Now you can already see this is much faster because it's less steps and also a different sampler. And you can see the output image resembles what we've input much more. So, right, this is quite similar. If we compare these, if I just add a null here, these look really very similar, but obviously the right one looks a lot more beautiful. And you can see, because we've added this kind of noise here in the background, and that's not being taken, like, you know, not being transferred one-to-one, but sometimes it creates these kind of structures in the background that I really like. If it was just black, usually it doesn't do that. So yeah, I think also 101 is a nice seed for this. Yeah, we've already made a huge step here. So one thing that we now might want to consider is creating a feedback loop here. So the idea being that whatever output we have, we can input again for the next step. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create another null from here, which I'm gonna call endpoint. There we go. I'm gonna make this orange, and I'm gonna use a select top here and put that over here. Now we could just put that into here, and I can just show you kind of what's happening when we do that. So before we actually work with the technique that I really want to show you. So one thing that I haven't showed you is that you can click on keep generating, and by itself it doesn't do anything, it doesn't start. But then if you hit pulse, it's gonna just keep generating. So now I'm gonna hit pulse, and you can see it's being generated here. It's gonna start to look very weird like this, because we're generating the new image, which is really just the same thing as before, based on the image before. So really, it just does this kind of weird sharpening thing. Shit, there's a lot of thunderstorm outside. What we can do though, like for example, is scaling this up. So let's just use a different seed here. Let's actually do a quick text to image. And now let's input that into here. And because we're transforming it now, I'm just going to do it quite extremely. And now we're doing image to image. And I'm going to click pulse. It's not going to do that thing as it did right now. But instead, it's going to kind of zoom in. It's a bit hard to see right now. But yeah, anyways, you can see it doesn't do that weird thing. And over time, like right now, it's way too extreme. That's why it's doing these kind of things. But it is kind of, that's how you would create a kind of zooming in effect here by creating this kind of feedback loop, right? We're sending out the image that it created into itself again, and that's how we're working with feedback as well. But as I said, that's not really what we're going for. I'm just gonna go down with the scaling here very slightly because it's still kind of nice to have that in there with the technique that I'm gonna show you now. So again, I'm gonna put that in here, turn off keep generating, and I actually want to composite the original input with that output that we have. So I'm going to put that in here, change it to maximum, but I don't want to have this full on in there. So first off, I just want to, usually it makes sense for the first one to not composite, to just make it based on this original texture, and then we can composite it with the previous frame. And I'm going to go down to the opacity to like 0.4, so it's just slightly in there. So in my experience, why I'm doing this is for kind of stability reasons, so it doesn't flicker that much. That I found that to work kind of nicely, and also yeah, generally it kind of the same information stays more in the system, right? So it's not gonna create something usually that is completely different than the frame before. That's what I mean with stability, right? But again, this is just something that I'm doing this way. It's not necessarily the best, and it's not necessarily something that I'm gonna keep doing, but let's see. All right, we can do as much as we want in this kind of feedback loop here. So one thing is actually that I want to sharpen this. I am going to use this tool also created by .simulate that you can, I think, also find on his Discord, just a sharpener. I'm going to do like 0.08, just sharpen the image slightly with every iteration, and also generally the output here. But you can also use the sharpen tools from the image filters here. I'm also going to add a simple adjust component that I've created myself. But then again, you don't really need this. It's just to make things easier for me. But in the end, this is really just level, HSV adjust, noise, and these kind of things. So all I'm going to do here is go down with my saturation to like 0.9. I've also found that to be good to not have too much saturation, or it should always slightly go down to saturation with every iteration, because sometimes otherwise StableDiffusion just increases the saturation too much. So I'm just going to finish this here by like this branch by adding an anti-alias. And just going to set this to ultra just to have smooth it out a bit. I'm going to add a null, call that PG, display that in the background, and add a movie file out, which we're going to look at in a second. So one main thing here about this technique is that we want to create this logic then that whenever there is a frame done, right? When the frame has finished being processed in StableDiffusion, we want to go one frame further here, because right now when we just generate a frame, it's always staying the same thing here. So just look at this. Right now we're at 18.7. Let's now add a null here and add a select to that. So this is all kind of hacky, but it works well, so no problem. Let's select current frame, and let's do 2 branches here. And here I'm gonna add a logic and change my convert input to on when value changed. So whenever this value changes, so whenever a frame is done and it moves to the next, then this is basically just very briefly being turned on and off like a pulse. To make this work, just add a delay and delay it by like 1 frame, and I don't know. So I can't really explain you why you have to do this, but it works. Otherwise, it doesn't really. We want to add a chop execute here that we're going to look at in a second. And we want to add another one which is based on or connected to this null. And here what we want to be working with is the on off to on and on to off functions. And we need to turn on the corresponding ones here and turn off value change. What we want to do here is just quickly, when this turns on, we want to go to our local time and turn on play. Okay, actually, I just noticed you're gonna have to. This is not gonna work. Never mind. But because it's gonna be overwritten. But we're gonna look at the play thing here now. We want to control that whenever the frame is done, we just want to hit play on and then right off again. So it's independent, local, and then time. So all we got to do here is type in OP, independent, local, time, dot par, dot play is 1. And we can just copy and paste that and type in 0 here. So when this goes from 0 to 1, it's going to play. When it goes from 1 to 0, it's going to stop playing. So it just moves on like 1 frame. Again, I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but it works. So again, it's 18.7 right now. If we hit pulse and wait a bit for the frame to be created, we now have the second frame, next frame. You can see it went 1 frame further, and here we're now at 18.8, so 1 frame further as well. And that's now how we're gonna be working, like, you know, all the time until somebody finds a better technique. This is how you go through this independent timeline, frame by frame, whenever frame here is finished. What you could do now is hit keep generating, and then hit generate frame. And then now it's gonna generate frame by frame, one after the other, and automatically move through this timeline, and therefore also create a texture that is based on each frame of the audio or video or whatever you want to use, right? So one last thing is now you might wonder how we could record this. This looks kind of weird right now. I liked 101 better. So yeah, the thing is, we want to have a video at the end with the audio. And we want to obviously include frame by frame, but we don't want to, like, if we were to record it now, it would be based on the current timeline. So it would look exactly what it looks like to us right now, which is, you know, every 5 to 10 seconds, there's a new frame, and that's not what we want. So we have the option here to change this to stop frame movie. I'm just going to change this to MPEG 4. It doesn't really matter that much, but whatever codec you want to use. Important is that we turn on unique suffix, because I'm just going to change my path here to export a folder that I've created on my root. And then I'm going to call this audio flowers. And why did I turn unique suffix on? It's because every time we save, we want to have a different number at the end, so the previous recording is not overwritten. Okay, so for the audio, we want to type in independent/audio. Because if we go in here, we can go in here and just name this audio because it's easier. So we just call this audio, and this is called independent. So that's why we're writing independent audio. Audio bit rate should be the highest possible. Movie FPS should be the same as our cook rate again. There we go. And obviously, we still need to record. But when we record, the interesting thing is it doesn't actually, like, it only records. So you have to add the frame once. So the thing is now, actually, as you can see, if there's the next frame being generated, this is not going to be changed. It kind of looks like it's being changed, but like the content here is changed, but the output isn't. So actually what we have to do to change it is to both have record on and then add a frame. So that's why we have this chop execute. So we can just delete everything but on value change. And now we can just type in OP movie file out 1 dot par dot add frame dot pulse. So basically, instead of hitting this button manually, every time the frame changes, it adds the frame. So every time StableDiffusion is done with creating a frame, it's gonna add that new frame to our video. So one last thing I like to do here is to copy this parameter and then bind that with the record. So now it's gonna record in my export folder, and every time a new frame is being generated, that is being added to the file. So in the end, we have a movie, like a MOV video file that has the audio in there and, you know, perfectly timed frames. So now if I turn this off, it actually also turns off keep generating, which is handy. And now in my folder, I have this file, which is very short now, obviously, but you can see it works. Yeah, so that's really the way to go here. So every time you hit keep generating and then pulse, it's gonna automatically create a new file with a new ID, and it's based on the audio. It's gonna save the audio, right frame rate and everything. So it's really nice setup. It works very well for me. Yeah, I think we have reached the end of this video, this very long video. Obviously, there's so much more you can do here. So, as I said, it doesn't have to be flowers. It can be anything, literally anything. But as I also said, it should kind of resemble what you're doing, what you're looking for in the end here already. So let's say you want to have trees. You're not going to work with circles, but you're going to work with lines, and then you might want to displace them or whatever. If you look at my Instagram, I've done a few different things. You can maybe get inspired there as well. Now you know the kind of base technique. So for all of those different things, it's really in the end the same idea. And what you can do in this feedback loop is also, you know, there's many things that you can manipulate, or how you can manipulate this texture. Go crazy with prompting. Go and change all of these parameters. You might want to use a different sampler. You might want to use different step counts, different models. You can work with control net. You can do a lot of different fun things here. When you export this, what you can also do is what I usually do is also incorporate two more tools into the mix. One of them being DaVinci Resolve, where you can use deflicker nicely to make it a bit less flickery, obviously, which works quite nicely. And the other thing is Topaz Labs. So right now, as I said, my resolution is 576 by 768, and then with Topaz Labs, which is also an AI tool, which unfortunately costs like $300, but it's a really powerful tool to upscale videos and to add frame interpolation and all these kind of things. Yeah, there you can upscale it to, like, I don't know, 1500 by 2000, whatever you want to have, like full HD, 4K, anything, and it looks quite good in my opinion. And the other thing I've just said, frame interpolation. So you could go with like 15 frames here, and then use frame interpolation in Topaz Labs to like go up with the FPS to like 30 or even 60. It doesn't necessarily always look great, and you're gonna have to think about how it works with audio and stuff, but technically that's a really nice way to go. Yeah, I was just mentioning the resolution again. So one little trick you can do here, because I also said StableDiffusion is kind of picky with resolutions, right? You can't input every resolution. So you can also just see when you input any resolution what StableDiffusion outputs then. That's how I got to this size. So, you know, you can input any resolution and then the output here, just see what that is and then just use that, right? So that's kind of a trick. All right, yeah, as I said, this is a work in progress. This is kind of a, I don't know, maybe too big of a word, but kind of pioneer kind of work, and I'm just testing out stuff. There might be a lot of things in here that can be improved, I'm sure of it. And there's gonna be new versions of StableDiffusion, of this component, of all kinds of different tools that are being used in this workflow. So who knows what it's gonna be like in a few months. But for now, I hope you're gonna have a lot of fun with this. And thank you for all the support on Patreon. And thank you for watching. See you in the next video.